The city awoke beneath the first light of dawn, a place where glass towers reached toward the sky while clay homes clung stubbornly to the earth below. The streets hummed with life, vendors calling out their wares, children weaving through traffic, and elders nodding at one another from shaded porches. It was a city of contrasts, modern ambition pressing against the quiet endurance of tradition. Golden sunlight gleamed off the reflective towers, but the shadows they cast fell long and cold over narrow alleys, reminding all who walked them of the roots they could not abandon. Amina moved through the streets with a quiet grace, her hands resting gently against the curve of her belly. Her clothing was simple, embroidered with the delicate patterns her mother had taught her, and yet she carried herself like a flame that refused to be dimmed. People noticed her, not with envy, but with the silent admiration that only patience and kindness could earn. The elders whispered of her dignity, the way she bore hardship without complaint, and even the children seemed drawn to her warmth. In a world chasing glitter and recognition, she was a reminder of a gentler truth, a strength that could not be measured in gold. Kofi followed at her side, his shoulders tight with a tension that only ambition could create. He glanced at the modern buildings, at the suits and handbags that flashed past, and felt a familiar unease. Love had brought him to Amina, yet the weight of society pressed against his chest, whispering that he must prove himself, that he must rise above the ordinary. His heart conflicted with his desire for status. Every step beside her seemed to remind him of the simplicity he feared would mark him as small. High above, in a world unreachable by most, the man known as the Lion of the City observed all. A figure both distant and commanding, he moved through his empire with a presence like ancestral spirits watching over their people. Rumors followed him as surely as footsteps. Some spoke of fortune, others of fear, but all agreed that his gaze could shape destinies. None knew when he would appear, yet his influence was everywhere, a silent hand guiding the fates of men and women alike. Yet beneath the surface of Amina's quiet life lay a secret, one hidden from all but the winds and the streets themselves. She was the daughter who had walked away from gold, the child of the Lion of the City who had chosen love over privilege. She had left wealth, power, and expectation behind, determined to build a life guided by her own heart. Her father's pride had been wounded, and he had severed ties, yet his vigilance never wavered. He watched from afar, unseen yet present, like the spirits of ancestors guarding the living. From the shadows, he observed the streets she walked, the people she greeted, and the man who held her hand. His presence was quiet, almost invisible, yet it bore a weight that could bend the course of life. He did not intervene, for he knew the lessons of endurance and choice must be learned by experience. Love, he had taught, was both a gift and a responsibility, and the mistakes of men and women alike would reveal themselves in time. Kofi's discomfort grew as he noticed the gazes that lingered on Amina. Society had its ways of marking what was acceptable, and in their eyes, her simplicity was a mark of shame. Every whisper, every sideways glance, tightened the knot in his chest. He feared the judgment of peers, the ridicule of colleagues, and the perception that he had settled beneath his own potential. In the quiet of the morning, surrounded by the hum of a city alive with ambition, the truth pressed upon him. The woman he had chosen to love was not enough in their eyes, and his pride would demand more than his heart had yet surrendered. Kofi paced the polished floors of their apartment, the early evening sun catching the sweat at his brow. He adjusted his tie again and again, as if straightening it could straighten the path to the power he so desperately craved. "If only they would see me as I deserve," he muttered, voice tight with hunger for recognition. Every glance in the mirror reminded him that he was not enough, not yet. Titles, status, and the approval of men he barely knew had become the measure of his worth, and in chasing it, his heart had grown blind to the woman who had stood faithfully beside him. "Are you ready?" Amina's gentle voice called from the bedroom. She appeared holding her small bag, her face glowing with hope, her hands brushing lightly over her belly. "The party. It could be a good night for us, Kofi. A new beginning." She smiled softly, eyes full of trust, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the door. Kofi swallowed and nodded, though the weight of expectation pressed heavier than ever. Yes, let's go," he said, though his voice lacked warmth. His mind churned with worry about impressions, about appearances, about the whispers of colleagues who might see him as weak. Love still lived in him somewhere, faint and flickering, but pride and ambition were louder, drowning the quiet flame of devotion Amina carried. The city's elite had gathered in a hall that shimmered like sunlight on water. Golden chandeliers stretched across the ceiling, casting glimmers on polished floors where men and women in designer attire moved like peacocks displaying their plumage. The air was thick with music and murmured conversation, laughter that rang louder than the pulse of tradition. Drums, barely audible beneath the chatter, whispered the songs of ancestors, a heartbeat of a culture half-remembered in the glittering opulence. Amina stepped into the hall, her embroidered gown modest yet elegant, its earthy colors and delicate patterns marking her as one who walked lightly upon the world. Heads turned, some with curiosity, others with quiet admiration. She moved with dignity, a flower among decorated masks, her humility shining brighter than the most dazzling jewels. She reached for Kofi's hand, squeezing it gently, unaware of the cold tightness that had grown there over the months. People will notice her simplicity, Kofi thought, chest tightening, as though her quiet dignity threatened his carefully constructed image. He forced a smile, masking the unease clawing at his pride. Around them, the wealthy laughed, danced, and drank, their world gleaming with success and power. Amina's presence was a gentle pulse of truth in the midst of gilded illusions, a reminder that worth was not always measured in gold or titles. "Stay close," Kofi whispered, voice low, yet carrying a sharp edge of command, as though proximity could protect him from judgment. Amina nodded, her heart still full of hope, believing this night could bring them together, while shadows of ambition and pride already began to drift between them, unseen but inevitable. The drums swelled faintly, ancestral echoes under the glitter, and the night stretched ahead, full of promises, tests, and the inevitability of truth finally rising to the surface. The moment Amina and Kofi entered the grand hall, eyes seemed to follow them as if the walls themselves were alive with whispers. Guests leaned closer, their voices hushed but sharp, like village gossip carried through the wind. "Who brought her?" a woman murmured, her jeweled fingers tapping impatiently on the table. "Is that really his wife?" someone else asked, eyes darting toward Amina's simple attire. Every glance felt like a knife, every whisper a judgment weighing heavier than any gold. The air vibrated with silent cruelty, a society obsessed with wealth and appearances passing verdicts without mercy. Kofi felt it immediately. His chest tightened, palms slick with sweat. The eyes of the powerful were not merely observing, they were measuring, marking him. Each gaze reminded him that his wife's humble dress, her modest poise, could be seen as a reflection of his weakness. "No, no, this cannot be," he thought, his stomach churning. Pride twisted into fear. To be seen as small, unworthy, diminished before men who held influence over his life and ambition, that thought alone made him tremble. Around them, women draped in silks, sequins, and diamonds laughed lightly, their elegance glittering under the chandeliers. Yet their beauty was hollow, their smiles shallow. They represented the heights of modern success, but the warmth that grew from quiet strength and patience was absent. Kofi's eyes followed them, comparing, measuring, and wondering why his simple wife could not shine like them. In the shadows of his pride, seeds of insecurity took root. He questioned her worth silently, comparing her to the women who commanded attention with every gesture. Love, once clear and certain, became entangled with envy, a poisonous thread of doubt. Could a humble dress ever compete with a gown sewn from status? Could kindness ever outweigh the glitter of wealth? In that moment, fear and ambition outweighed loyalty, and Kofi felt the first tremors of a choice he would soon regret. The gathering held its breath when he stepped forward, voice loud enough to carry through the hall. She is not my wife," he declared, a line cut through with trembling pride. Gasps rippled like fire through dry grass. Heads turned, jaws tightened, and whispers erupted into a storm of judgment. Truth was abandoned, honor sacrificed to protect his fragile image. Amina's eyes remained calm, a river steady beneath the roar of the crowd. She stood tall, her hands resting lightly on her belly, the life within her moving with gentle assurance. Her silence spoke louder than anger ever could. She was rooted like an ancient tree, her dignity unshaken, her composure a lesson in endurance and quiet power. The unborn child, a living spark of hope, seemed to illuminate the hall despite the humiliation. Each breath of Amina's reminded those watching that truth and innocence could not be hidden, that life itself was stronger than lies or betrayal. Kofi felt a fleeting approval from those around him, nods of recognition and murmurs of agreement. Yet the price was heavy. His spirit faltered beneath the weight of what he had lost. Integrity traded for social acceptance, love cast aside for status, and a future now marked by regret. In that hall, under golden lights and ancestral drums faint beneath luxury, a man gained the approval of society but lost the heart he once held closest. A hush fell over the grand hall as the doors opened, and a presence stepped inside that seemed to draw the very air into stillness. The Lion of the City, a man whose wealth and authority were whispered of in every corner of the metropolis, moved with the grace of a king and the weight of ancestors behind each step. Golden light reflected off polished floors, but none could shine brighter than the quiet force of respect his presence commanded. Conversations died mid-word, and even the laughter of the elite seemed to bow before him. His gaze swept the room, discerning the proud, the vain, and the humble alike. Then it stopped. It found Amina. In that instant, time itself seemed to pause, the past and present converging like two rivers meeting beneath the sun. Memories of a daughter long gone stirred in the depth of his eyes, a recognition that carried both sorrow and love. Amina, sensing the weight of his stare, remained motionless. Her heart thumped softly beneath her chest, yet her exterior betrayed nothing. She had learned the power of stillness, of endurance, of quiet dignity that could withstand the whispers of men and the scorn of society. Each breath was measured, each glance steady, a woman rooted as firmly as the baobab trees her elders revered. The Lion of the City moved toward her, his steps deliberate, filled with purpose. Where Kofi had publicly denied her, this man offered acknowledgment. A gentle nod, a hand extended in respect, a subtle bow of recognition, before all the onlookers, he restored honor that had been taken, silently declaring that true value was measured not in wealth or appearances, but in the courage to walk one's path with dignity. Murmurs began to ripple through the crowd, rising from confusion to quiet astonishment. Heads turned toward Amina, whispers growing like wind through tall grass. "Who is she?" someone asked. Another shook their head. "There is something we do not see." The balance of power shifted subtly, and those who believed themselves untouchable began to sense that the scales of respect were not where they had assumed. Kofi's chest tightened. His mind raced, shadows of dread slipping in through cracks he had ignored. Every word unspoken, every act of betrayal now seemed magnified in the piercing presence of the man who could unmask truths without raising his voice. His fingers trembled against his glass, the false bravado of earlier moments dissolving in a tide of unease. The Lion of the City's voice cut through the murmurs, calm yet resonant, carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "Tell me, a man who seeks favor among the powerful, can he protect that which is closest to his heart? Loyalty, family, honor, these are the riches no treasure can buy." Each sentence hung like a riddle, echoing lessons whispered by elders in village squares, lessons that had long survived the passage of time. Eyes of all in attendance turned inward, the words carving questions into hearts. Kofi's mind grasped at explanations, but the truth pressed in like the sun against the horizon. The Lion's gaze bore down, not with anger, but with the certainty of ancestral judgment. Betrayal, he implied, could not hide forever. Every choice, every denial, every act of pride was counted by the spirits of those who came before. The quiet truth began to rise, like mist from the savannah at dawn, signaling that the reckoning had only just begun. Amina stood as the murmurs of the crowd swirled around her like restless spirits. The Lion of the City took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers, and spoke with a voice that commanded both awe and reverence. "This woman," he said, "is my daughter, the one I thought lost to pride and choice, yet here she stands, unbroken." The hall froze. Conversations stopped mid-breath. Faces paled. Whispers turned into gasps. Shock rippled like thunder across the gathering. Men and women who had measured worth in jewels and titles suddenly felt the weight of their own assumptions. "Impossible," someone whispered. "She, the quiet one." Eyes darted toward Kofi, whose hands trembled against the polished table. His mind raced. Every ambition, every hour spent chasing approval, crumbled beneath the revelation. The wife he had scorned, the woman he had denied, was not just anyone. She was a daughter of power, a force beyond his comprehension. Amina's calm demeanor only deepened the effect. Her presence radiated strength far greater than gold, far beyond the empty applause of the elite. In her stillness, she carried the dignity of ancestors, the quiet wisdom of mothers who had endured storms without complaint. Kofi's face, once proud, now reflected fear and shame. His betrayal, laid bare before all, became a lesson written not in words but in the stillness of truth. The elders would have recognized it, the way truth finds its voice, how the unseen judges with patience older than the tallest trees. Justice moved quietly but inevitably, like rivers carving valleys, unseen yet unstoppable. Amina's silence spoke louder than anger ever could. She did not strike back with fury, nor did she demand restitution. She simply stood, embodying the principle that dignity and patience can topple arrogance, that quiet strength can teach lessons louder than any shout. The crowd, still murmuring, sensed the weight of what had occurred. Faces reflected awe, guilt, and newfound respect. Kofi, once blinded by pride, now faced the reality that he had traded love, loyalty, and honor for fleeting status. And through it all, Amina remained unshaken, a living testament that true power does not reside in wealth, but in courage, character, and the unyielding heart of a woman who carries life within her. The story of this night, as the elders would say, would be whispered for generations, a tale of pride, betrayal, and the triumph of truth. The lion of the city stepped forward, his presence quiet but undeniable, like the slow approach of a river in the dry season, carrying power that could not be resisted. "Kofi," he said, his voice steady and deep, resonating like the drumbeats of the ancestors, "we measure a man not by the wealth he gathers, but by the honor he holds." The room went silent, every whisper caught mid-breath, as if the walls themselves were holding judgment. Kofi's chest tightened. The polished shoes of the elites and the gold on their wrists could not shield him from the weight of ancestral eyes. The father's gaze pierced him, calm yet unyielding, like a tree that had watched generations rise and fall. "You have chosen pride over love, ambition over loyalty," the lion continued, each word cutting deeper than any blade. "And in that choice, you have revealed the man you truly are." The crowd shifted uneasily, sensing the power of quiet authority. No shouts, no accusations, only the measured, steady voice of a man whose lineage demanded respect. Kofi felt his mask of ambition begin to crack. The titles, the parties, the respect he had chased, all dissolved into emptiness. What remained was the truth that he had traded honor for fleeting admiration. Amina's hand rested on her belly, her calm radiance a stark contrast to the trembling man before them. The child within her, untouched by shame, became a symbol of tomorrow, a life that would rise beyond betrayal and pride. Kofi's eyes widened as realization struck like a sudden storm. He had not only lost status, but he had lost love, family, and the respect that could never be bought. The hall seemed to hold its breath as the lesson settled over everyone present. Wealth could shine, titles could dazzle, but a man without honor was poorer than any farmer under the scorching sun. And as the lion of the city turned his gaze toward Amina, the message was clear. Dignity, patience, and truth endure, long after pride has fallen and ambition has been laid bare. The story of this night, whispered through the hearts of all who witnessed, would be remembered as a lesson carved in memory, a tale of character stronger than gold, of pride that leads only to ruin, and of hope that blossoms even in the shadows of betrayal. Amina lifted her gaze, steady and unwavering, and spoke. Her voice carried the calm strength of a river cutting through stone, a tone shaped by patience and suffering. "I have endured," she said, "not to break, but to grow. I am no longer the woman whose worth is measured by another's pride." Every ear in the room turned toward her, the hum of whispered gossip falling silent in respect for her dignity. Her words did not burn with anger, they glowed with quiet power, like the last ember of a fire that refuses to die. She continued, "Revenge has no place where truth and self-respect live. I choose to stand for my life, my child, and the honor that no betrayal can take from me." The crowd, once curious, now watched with awe. The lesson was clear. Strength lies in holding one's head high, not in striking back. The lion of the city nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting both pride and relief. "You speak as one who carries the wisdom of generations," he said. "Justice is not only punishment, it is recognition of truth and the protection of legacy. Your mother, your ancestors, and this family see your worth." His words, like the drumbeat of the elders, reminded all present that power alone is nothing without the guidance of blood and tradition. He turned his attention to Amina, offering her a choice, his voice steady as the setting sun. "You may return to the life from which you once walked away, a life of wealth and safety. Or you may continue your path, forging your destiny on your own terms." The weight of the decision pressed on her, yet she felt no fear, only clarity. Kofi fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "Amina, please, forgive me. I was blinded by fear and pride. I see now. I see what I lost. But Amina's gaze remained calm, her words soft yet resolute. Some wounds are not meant to be erased. Respect must be earned, not begged for. A hush fell over the gathering. Even the powerful seemed to pause, sensing the gravity of the moment. Redemption, they understood, is not given lightly. The question lingered in the air: can a broken man truly be made whole again? Kofi's tears, heavy and bitter, met no promise of relief. Only the silent power of a woman who had chosen her path and reclaimed her voice, unshaken, unbowed, and dignified. Amina stood tall, her shoulders steady, her heart heavy but clear. She looked at Kofi, whose eyes, once filled with pride, now darted with desperation and shame. "I will not return to a home built on lies," she said, her voice calm yet unwavering. "My honor is mine to guard. No wealth, no title, no plea can take that from me." The room, once buzzing with murmurs, fell silent, as if the walls themselves acknowledged the power of a woman who chose dignity over a broken love. Her father stepped forward, his presence like the shade of an ancient baobab, protective yet not suffocating. "You may walk your path with my guidance, but it will be on your terms," he said. Amina nodded, understanding that support was not a chain but a shield, a gift to be shaped by her own wisdom. She would accept care without surrendering autonomy, proving that strength is not independence but in knowing one's worth. Kofi sank into the weight of his choices. Whispers of his downfall traveled faster than the evening wind. The respect he had sought through ambition and deceit crumbled before him. Opportunity slipped like water through his fingers. The community watched, a reminder that in the eyes of tradition, betrayal carries a price far heavier than loss of wealth. He had gambled love for pride, and the loss was absolute. Amina turned away, her eyes soft but resolute. She carried within her the quiet strength that had once been tested and now emerged unbroken. Her presence alone became a testament to resilience, a symbol that honor and moral power outshine glittering wealth. People began to speak of her not as a woman of misfortune, but as one who embodied the dignity of generations, a living lesson whispered like a folktale under the moon. In the calm of her home, she placed a hand over her womb, feeling the gentle stirrings of life. "You will know truth, courage, and humility," she whispered to the child within. "You will walk a path built on honor, not pride. You will inherit the strength that comes not from gold, but from knowing who you are and standing by it." Each heartbeat seemed to echo with promise, planting the seeds of integrity, hope, and wisdom for a future untainted by the shadows of betrayal. Amina walked slowly through the quiet streets of the city, her mind heavy but her spirit unbroken. The echoes of the night still lingered, whispers of betrayal, glances of judgment, the weight of a man's pride laid bare before all. She thought of the lessons carved deep into her heart. Pride destroys what love builds, character outshines wealth, betrayal carries consequences, and the true power of a woman is not in her beauty, but in her dignity. Each thought settled like a stone in her chest, grounding her in the wisdom of generations long past. She paused at the crossroads where the old village paths met the rising towers of the modern city. One foot felt the pull of the past, the other reached toward the promise of the future. "I will honor myself," she whispered to the wind, her hand brushing her belly. "I will guide my child with truth, courage, and humility. We will walk a path unshaken by lies, unbowed by wealth or fear." In her stillness, she carried both memory and hope, the quiet strength of women who had endured storms and taught their children to stand taller than the tallest trees. As she moved on, the city seemed to listen. Stories of her courage and dignity began to spread like gentle ripples on a river. Market women, shopkeepers, and elders spoke softly of the woman who had chosen honor over love betrayed, wisdom over anger, and strength over submission. Her journey became a tale whispered in corners and echoed in laughter, a modern African folktale alive within the city's heartbeat. Through Amina, the ancient truths lived again, teaching all who would listen that character, courage, and dignity are the wealth that never fades.